My name is Joseph Callahan. I live right here in West Springfield. I'm 20 years old, and this will be the first presidential election I'm ever voting in.
Joe, you have a really impressive background in politics so far for just being 20 years old, and in fact, you call yourself a political activist. Can you expand a little bit on what that means and some of the political involvement you've engaged in so far?
So like I said, I'm 20 years old. I first started getting into politics when I was 15. In high school, my brother was really engaged politically, and he sort of, brought me in a little bit. In my mind, what it means to be a political activist is just, really advocating for the issues that you care about. So like for me, it's education, the environment, voting rights. Those issues are core to me, and those are the ones that I care the most about. And so doing what I can to make sure that my voice is heard on those issues, particularly locally, those really drive home what I think it means to be a political activist.
And you said, doing what you can about the issues you care about. So what are some of the things that you've done to engage in the issues that you care about and make sure that your voice in particular is being heard?
Sure. So when I was 16, I joined the Massachusetts High School Democrats. I'm a registered Democrat. When I joined, our main mission was to just engage youth in political activism, getting out the vote, campaigning for local elections. To a lot of people, meeting like their mayor or their congressman, their state senator, is a very intimidating thing. And so my main job was just help break down those barriers, get to know these people, and make them more accessible to people in my demographic, my generation. These aren't just elected officials. These are your neighbors, and these are people who, they work for you. And if you have an issue with something going on in your town, you should be able to speak to them and get your voice heard on whatever is bothering you.
Right, and why are local elections so vital to emphasize, especially for the younger generation, your generation?
So what often most people don't understand is that, they think that the national elections that happen every 4 years, that's the big deal. That's the thing that drives home, big media coverage and everything. But really, at the end of the day, what happens at the national level does not impact you on a day-to-day level at all. The things that really do matter are those local elections. So your election for mayor, school committee, town council. Those are the elections that'll really impact, their decisions will impact you on more of a day-to-day basis. They determine whether or not there will be more teachers at your local school, whether or not your hospital gets funded, whether or not, the park they're in right now, Midnight Park, can stay clean and running, or if it's going to be shut down. Stuff like that.
You mentioned that this election, it's important to vote now more than ever. Why do you feel that passion that this is the election to make sure your voice is counted, and what impact do you think your generation can have on this election?
So, Generation Z, so my generation, we don't really get a lot of credit. Recently, we just helped. I wasn't as instrumental in the effort. I was doing some other stuff, but a lot of kids from Generation Z helped get Ed Markey reelected. He defeated his primary challenger, Joe Kennedy III, in large part due to a lot of grassroots youth activism by people of my generation. And that often gets overlooked quite a lot. I feel as though that this election in particular is most important because I feel as though we're slipping into a backsliding democracy, nationally at least, and that I really want to avoid that. I will be voting for Joe Biden, not because I necessarily agree with him politically on a lot of issues, but because I want to help bring civility back into what I consider a very polarized election cycle, and a polarizing administration in general. And so what I'm trying to do is not only drive home the message that this election is really important to sort of just bring facts back into the forefront, both nationally and locally, but just also get people engaged, like, hey, you voting now is going to make an impact decades to come, whether or not you realize that now or you're not going to know that for the next 20 years. Voting is incredibly important. And so if I can help you just learn about who your representatives are, help you make a decision nationally on who you're voting for, then that's what I want to do.
So what would you say to people who are saying, I'm not voting in this election?
To me, that says either you don't care enough to actually go out and vote, and you just want to stay away from all that noise, or two, you're not informed enough to feel as though you're comfortable going into the voting booth to make an educated vote, which is totally understandable for a lot of people. Saying I'm not informed enough to make a decision or have an opinion on that is totally okay. But what they have to do is just, become educated. The big one that I always point to are ballot initiative questions. There's 2 in the state of Massachusetts right now. And how we vote on those will impact our lives either directly or indirectly for decades to come. And so when I hear, just like even some of my friends in my own, social circles, hey, like I'm not registered to vote, but I want to register to vote so that the words that I say and the opinions that I have, they have value when I go to the voting booth. That I think is what sends the biggest message, just helping people get out to vote who've never voted for the first time before. That's why I feel as though voter registration drives are really important, and how they can really help get out the vote a lot more. Just helping people get educated with what it's like to engage in their local communities is really important. And so, like I said, when I hear that people don't vote or they decide they don't want to vote, there are many different factors that play into that. But to just completely write it off as saying they don't want to vote, so they don't care about where this country's going or where their town's going, isn't really the fairest criticism.